Imagine a man standing beneath a waterfall of honey. At first, he laughs. He opens his mouth. Sweetness everywhere. But soon, the honey thickens. His laughter slows. His breath becomes work. What once felt like abundance quietly becomes suffocation. This is the paradox of our age. Never in history have humans been so entertained, so stimulated, so catered to. Never have we had so many flavors, so many screens, so many shortcuts to pleasure. And yet beneath the glow of our devices, beneath the endless scroll and the constant buzz, something feels thinner. We are full, but not nourished, busy, but not alive, stimulated, but not satisfied. We call this progress. We call it convenience. We call it freedom. But the ancients might have called it a spell. Dopamine culture does not announce itself as a tyrant. It arrives smiling, helpful, efficient. It whispers, just one more video, one more notification, one more achievement, one more hit of novelty. And because it never raises its voice, we don't notice when it starts making our choices for us. Here's the first truth we must sit with gently. Dopamine is not pleasure. It is desire. It is the leaning forward of the mind. The promise, not the payoff. In the wild, this system was sacred. It pushed us to hunt, to explore, to build, to survive. It said, there is something meaningful just ahead. But modern life has learned how to press this button again and again and again, not to fulfill us, but to keep us reaching. So we reach constantly. Our fingers twitch toward screens before we are aware of hunger. Our minds skim surfaces, afraid of depth. Silence feels awkward now, like a mistake. We do not suffer from too little pleasure. We suffer from too much anticipation, with nowhere to land. And slowly, quietly, almost politely, our baseline of happiness erodes. Because when everything is exciting, nothing is meaningful. When everything is available, nothing feels earned. When every moment is optimized for stimulation, the soul has no room to breathe. This is not a moral failure. It is not weakness. It is biology meeting an environment it was never meant to survive. Unchanged. The tragedy is not that dopamine exists. The tragedy is that we have forgotten how to come home after it speaks. And so we stand beneath the waterfall, mouths open, wondering why sweetness no longer satisfies. Dopamine does not say, this feels good. It says, this could feel good. That distinction changes everything. It is the chemical of pursuit, not rival, the spark that pulls you toward the horizon, not the warmth of the fire once you sit beside it. In ancient times, this was elegant. You saw tracks in the dirt. Dopamine surged. You found shelter. Dopamine surged. Effort led to meaning. Meaning led to rest. But now, the tracks never end. The shelter keeps moving. And rest feels undeserved. Modern systems have learned that if they keep you anticipating, you will keep engaging, not because you are satisfied, but because you are almost satisfied. This is why the next episode autoplays, why the feed refreshes infinitely, why rewards are randomized, likes unpredictable, validation just scarce enough to remain intoxicating. The brain, ancient and trusting, assumes effort will eventually lead to fulfillment, so it keeps going. What it does not realize is that the goalposts have been replaced with treadmills. And here's the quiet cost. When dopamine fires constantly, baseline joy drops. The ordinary becomes dull. The simple becomes invisible. What once felt like enough now feels like nothing. A sunset competes with a screen. A conversation competes with notifications. A peaceful afternoon feels strangely empty, like something is missing. So we fill it instantly. We check. We scroll, we snack, we distract, not because we are evil, but because we are uncomfortable with the absence of stimulation. Stillness has become foreign territory. And yet, notice this, the moments that truly shape us are rarely dopamine heavy. Love deepens slowly. Wisdom ripens quietly. Meaning grows in places where nothing flashy happens at all. Dopamine culture teaches us to chase peaks. But a life lived only in peaks has no ground. When anticipation never resolves, the nervous system stays tense, always reaching, always leaning forward, always slightly dissatisfied. This is why exhaustion can exist alongside privilege, why anxiety, can thrive in comfort, why boredom feels painful rather than peaceful. The mind was not designed to live in a constant state of almost and slowly, without noticing. We begin to confuse intensity with aliveness. We seek louder experiences because quieter ones no longer register. The tragedy is subtle. We don't lose happiness all at once. We trade it, moment by moment, for stimulation that never quite delivers. Eventually, something fractures. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the quiet continuity of who you are begins to thin attention. Once a river becomes a scatter of droplets. Desire, once rooted, becomes restless. Love, once deep, becomes impatient. We start to feel bored even in the presence of what we once prayed for. And boredom, in dopamine culture, is treated as an emergency. Yet boredom was once a doorway, a threshold where imagination stirred, where longing matured into purpose, where the mind, with nothing to grab, finally turned inward. Now boredom feels like failure. So we flee it. But in fleeing boredom, we flee ourselves. Notice how difficult it has become to sit with discomfort, to stay with a hard conversation, to endure the slow middle of anything worthwhile. We want transformation without tension, connection without vulnerability, achievement without sacrifice. But life does not unfold that way. The ancient sages understood this. Happiness is not the absence of desire, it is the right relationship with it. Dopamine culture breaks that relationship. It teaches us to want constantly, but shallowly, to consume without digesting, to move without arriving, and so the self becomes fragmented, pulled in 1,000 directions. Anchored in none, even love begins to suffer. When novelty is prized above depth, people become interchangeable. When stimulation replaces presence, intimacy feels demanding. When desire is trained to spike quickly, commitment feels slow and heavy. We confuse chemistry with connection, excitement with meaning, and then we wonder why loneliness persists in a world of constant contact. The nervous system, overstimulated, forgets how to feel safe in stillness. Silence feels loud, peace feels empty, rest feels unproductive. So we keep going, not toward joy but away from discomfort. And here's the deepest paradox: the very systems designed to keep us feeling good are training us to be less capable of happiness. Because happiness is not a surge, it is a steadiness. It is the ability to stay, to remain present when nothing exciting is happening, to feel content without needing to chase. This capacity is not lost, it is merely dormant, waiting beneath the noise for us to remember how to listen. There comes a moment, often quiet, often private, when a person realizes they are no longer choosing. They are responding. The hand reaches for the phone before the thought forms. The mind opens an app without intention. The day dissolves into a sequence of impulses that feel personal, yet strangely automatic. This is how control fades, not through force, but through convenience. Dopamine culture does not take away freedom. It replaces it with frictionless options that feel like freedom. Choice without pause, desire without reflection, movement without meaning. And because nothing is technically forced, we blame ourselves when dissatisfaction grows. But compulsion rarely announces itself as chains. It feels like preference. The sages warned us of this long ago, not in the language of neuroscience, but in the language of awareness. They said the unexamined desire becomes the master, not because desire is evil, but because unconscious desire multiplies endlessly. What we call losing control is often just forgetting how to stop. Stopping feels uncomfortable now, because when the noise fades, what remains must be faced: the unprocessed grief, the unnamed fear, the quiet question of whether we are living the life we intended or simply the life that was easiest to click into. So we keep the volume high. We mistake constant input for engagement with life. But life is not loud by default. It is subtle, rhythmic, patient. Control, in its deepest sense, is not about discipline, it is about intimacy with one's own impulses. To notice the urge without obeying it, to feel the pull without immediately moving. This is not repression, it is sovereignty. And sovereignty feels unfamiliar in a world designed for speed. Yet something remarkable happens when we slow even slightly. The nervous system exhales, attention begins to gather, desire clarifies instead of multiplying. We begin to sense which longings are noise and which are signals. Not all cravings deserve fulfillment. Some are simply echoes of overstimulation. Freedom is not found in saying yes to everything. It is found in discovering what you can gently decline, and in that declining, something opens. Space when the chase softens, depth returns, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a subtle warmth spreading through ordinary moments. Food tastes fuller when not eaten in haste. Conversation deepens when not interrupted by escape routes. Time stretches when it is no longer being optimized. This is the quiet rebellion, choosing slowness in a culture of urgency, choosing presence in a culture of elsewhere, choosing effort in a culture of ease. Effort, paradoxically, restores joy because the nervous system needs contrast. Without resistance, there is no satisfaction. Without patience, there is no meaning. The great teachers did not speak against pleasure. They spoke against attachment to pleasure as the source of fulfillment. When pleasure is allowed to come and go, it nourishes. When it is clung to, it drains. The return to depth is not ascetic. It is not about abandoning the world. It is about rebalancing the rhythm between desire and rest. This means letting boredom exist long enough to transform. Letting silence teach you what noise cannot. Letting effort rebuild trust in your own capacity. At first, this feels uncomfortable. Withdrawal often does, but beneath the discomfort is something precious, sensitivity returning. Colors sharpen, thoughts slow, small joys once drowned out become audible again. You begin to feel more with less. This is not deprivation. It is refinement. And refinement brings dignity back to desire. You stop chasing what sparkles briefly and start choosing what sustains quietly. Life becomes less dramatic but more real. And real life, lived fully, does not shout, it hums. Happiness, then, is not a peak state to be engineered. It is a ground state to be remembered. It emerges when desire is no longer frantic, when the nervous system trusts that nothing essential is missing. This trust cannot be downloaded. It must be cultivated through pauses, through limits, through moments of deliberate enoughness. The sages called this contentment not because life was perfect, but because the self was no longer at war with the present. Dopamine will always speak. It is part of being human, but it does not need to be obeyed blindly. You can listen and still choose to stay. Stay with the moment. Stay with the person in front of you. Stay with the breath as it enters and leaves without demanding improvement. In this staying, something ancient awakens, a quiet joy, a steady warmth, a sense of belonging that does not depend on stimulation. You realize you were never meant to be constantly excited. You were meant to be deeply alive, and aliveness does not rush. It unfolds like a long exhale, like evening light across a familiar room, like the relief of no longer chasing the next moment, because this one is enough. Not forever, just now. And now is where life has always been waiting.